I take all of these cases so seriously, and you're right, there are times that I don't sleep at night. We all can do something. Don't just say, you know what, again, don't turn a blind eye. Use your voice.
Welcome to Come Back with Erica Cobb, a community of folks like yourselves who are getting ready and staying ready for their next chapter. Where my guest today is going to talk all about folks who we're hoping have a next chapter that we can celebrate. She is the co-founder of the Black and Missing Foundation, a foundation that brings awareness to missing people of color, as well as the founder of a boutique public relations agency for nonprofits, the NWR Communications Group. With close to 2 decades of experience in public relations, she's involved in all aspects of Black and Missing Foundation's operations, including the development and execution of strategic outreach and press to ensure coverage of the foundation's mission and initiatives. She knows the power and reach of media coverage as highlighted in the HBO docuseries Black and Missing. She has garnered local, national, and international media placements with platforms such as CNN, Essence, The View, Oprah Daily, and New York Times, just to name a few, which continue to keep the issue of missing and exploited persons of color in the forefront. Natalie Wilson, welcome to Come Back with Erica Cobb.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you so much for having me.
I really appreciate you. A couple of months ago, we had your partner, Derica, on, and the outpouring of love and support was just amazing. So I'm so happy to have you on today.
Thank you. Thank you for using your platform, to share it with us. It's truly an honor and a blessing. As you know, we've been pounding the pavement for so many years about the Black and Missing Foundation. So just to continue to get the word out and again, for you supporting us, it's amazing and it's a blessing to us.
Well, it's a blessing to me as well. So let's start with, we know that your partner had a law enforcement background. You actually have a public relations background. So the synergy in this mission is completely unmatched. So, why was it important for you to be a part of Black and Missing, starting the Black and Missing Foundation? And was there a specific moment where you felt like this is my calling?
Absolutely. Just hearing about the case of Tamika Houston, which is the inspiration behind the Black and Missing Foundation, and to know that her aunt, really struggled to get media coverage, national media coverage around her disappearance was really disheartening. Right after Tamika disappeared, Natalie Holloway disappeared. And I'm sure when I said her name, you can imagine or you can see her face.
Right.
Laurie Hacking disappeared. And Rebecca, who's Tamika's aunt, she went to those same reporters, same networks, same programs, just asking them to cover her niece's story. And she didn't get any coverage at all, national coverage. So that, I knew that I had to use my expertise or my talents to help these families. And I see my role really as the publicist for these families. I am their spokesperson. And I want to make sure that we saturate our local and national media markets so that their names can be household names too. As I mentioned, we know the Gabby Petitos, the Natalie Holloway, the Chandra Levy, but can you name a Black or brown person that has gotten a national media coverage? Most people can't, and we're trying to change that narrative.
I have I call it a personal story by proximity, but I do remember the very first Black woman that I saw get national media attention. It stuck out to me for a couple of reasons. Her name was Naila Franklin. She was from Chicago. Her ex-boyfriend, who was actually my neighbor, ended up
Mhm.
being the murderer. And it was something that I remember seeing it on cable news, which I actually remember stopping down just from seeing her photo because I
Mhm.
couldn't recall ever seeing a Black female missing story. And then when I realized that this was a woman who I had shared an elevator with, that I had actually seen her personally, I mean, right now I even have, goosebumps just thinking about it because, you know, I remember thinking as the story was unfolding, had she not been all the things, a pharmaceutical rep for Eli Lilly.
Mhm.
She was, had, I believe, a master's degree. She was of a certain affluence.
Mm.
And that was a big a talking point about how she was special, and she was so incredibly special. But when we think about how the average person who isn't a person of color doesn't have to check off all of those boxes, it is quite striking when you see a Naila Franklin getting national attention and realizing that you must be someone extraordinary in order to be thought or amplified in that way.
Right. And it's very disheartening.
Mm.
And what we're trying to do is change the narrative that these are our mothers. They are our daughters and sisters, our grandparents, our sons, and they are our neighbors as well. They're our families. And it's sad that, that it's stacked against them before they even go missing because they're all already labeled as being involved with some type of criminal activity. They're stereotyped. And it's really unfair because the families miss their loved one,
Mm.
and the community, we miss them as well. So it's so unfair that they're not getting the coverage and the law enforcement assistance that's needed. And that's why media coverage is so important, because it alerts the community that someone is missing. And we could all be vigilant and help search for them, and it can speed up the recovery efforts. But most importantly, it puts pressure on law enforcement to add resources to the case. If you take the case of Gabby Petito, I mean, law enforcement used our taxpayer dollars to search for her, and, we understand that her family's hearts were broken looking for her. But if you look at Daniel Robinson's family and so many other family members of color, they have to spend their own dollars to
Right.
look for their missing loved one and their own resources. So media coverage is vital and it's key.
I'm when you said the family has to spend their own dollars and resources, oftentimes a lot of families don't have those types of resources. But what you're doing with your career in PR is really bridging that gap. So as you bridge that gap, how are you being, because it's not just when we say resources, everyone always thinks money, and money is a
Right.
part of it, but resources is also about time. So how do you make that work for you personally? And on that personal front, how are you able to, quite frankly, how are you able to sleep at night? Being, I mean, because being on a daytime talk show, I struggle a lot of seasons to sleep thinking about all of the stories that we're talking about because there's this major empathy factor. So, are you driven by what your passion and your purpose is in terms of your skill set? How does that work for you?
I take all of these cases so seriously. And you're right, there are times that I don't sleep at night. And lately at 5, 6 in the morning, my phone is pinging, families are texting.
Mm.
Um, it's just frustrating what they go through. It's disheartening. And I think about my own family, and it could be me, it could be my family member that's missing. And I would want someone to do all that they can
Right.
and to use their resources to help me. And fortunately, because of the career that I'm in, I have made contacts along the way, have built media partnerships, and people that are willing to use their platforms for these families. I remember when we first started, and even sometimes today, there was a case out of St. Louis, and a mother could not get the media to cover her missing daughter. And I called every news station. And finally, one of the assignment editors was like, you know what, stop calling. We would show her on air. But those are the things that we have to deal with, and we're trying to shield the families from dealing with that.
Right.
So how can I shrink back? I mean, if someone says no, I have to keep going
Yeah.
because I know that I want the families to get the answers or the closure that they deserve. The unknowing is the most heartbreaking part for them. And if we can get that media coverage, it really helps. Or that social media traction, getting these cases to go viral,
Mhm.
would provide answers for families. I'm Caribbean, and sometimes I have to stop, listen to my calypso, dance a little bit, and then get back in that work mode because I know there are thousands of families who need help. And again, that media coverage is powerful. I remember being on a national platform, The View, and within 14 minutes
Mm.
of the segment airing, we received a tip that led directly to the missing child. What if we didn't get that coverage? Where would that child be?
I yeah, there's so many things that I'm thinking as you're speaking, Natalie. And well, for starters, the idea of the strength in numbers, which kind of leads me into my next question, because when you're talking about how mainstream media really ignores so many of these missing people of color cases, I think about how you started Black and Missing Foundation. Was it the strength in the numbers that kind of got you through, as opposed to being like an individual family searching for one specific person? Like, what was the adversity like, and what was the first breakthrough for you? Was The View the first one?
No, actually, it started, I think, was with our local um, media. And most people think that you do need that national media, but tap into your local newspapers, your local television stations, and get to know that assignment editor or reporters that want to tell that story and create a partnership with your local your local outlets, because then the national outlets are also looking for stories. And what do? They normally go to the local stations.
Mm.
So The View is one of many successes that we have had. And I don't say that to be, I say that humbly. We have come a long way as an organization, but we still have a long ways to go. And because of the HBO docuseries, news outlets are now coming to us and saying, hey, we see our biases, and
Mm.
how can we do a better job? Even law enforcement, they're coming to us saying, how can we partner to change the narrative, to change the stereotypes that's really hindering finding these missing individuals? So we're holding on to hope, and we see a light at the end of the tunnel, that things will change for the better.
It's so, when you say get to know the assignment editors, and I am thinking, being on the inside of a newsroom, so to speak, our situation's a little is set up a little
Mhm.
different as a daytime talk show. But I also think about how, what comes first, because if you don't have representation that's
Mhm.
indicative of the community, then the empathy tends to be lost on those stories as well. So when you're talking about, the assignment editor, if that person, if it doesn't tap into their spirit and sensibility, a lot of times that's the reason why it falls on deaf ears, because they don't see it as a story to be worthy of the attention of their newsroom. So it's not only, the idea of people getting the word out, but it's also who's getting the word out. So
Ab-
there's like so much work to do. I've seen real progress since I've been in television and in newsrooms, nearly 20 years ago. But we have so much further to go. And I could tell you, you were on the daytime talk show that I'm on.
Mhm.
And it made such a difference because we went weeks of just highlighting Black and missing, Black and missing. And it really was quite an impactful thing on my heart and my spirit. But it also reminded everyone in that room that it can't just be a block of time. Like, we need to be very purposeful
Mhm.
with getting these messages out and amplifying.
And you're so right. And again, it goes back to having those conversations and having those partnerships where I can call on Erica and say, Erica, I have a hot case. I have a mother who's looking for her child. Can you help me? And then you take it back to the editors or the assignment desk or someone that can say, hey, yes, I hear you. Let's do something about it. But we all have to use the resources that we have to bring about change. You can't just turn a blind eye because your community isn't affected by it. This
Mm.
is an issue that affects us all as a nation. And what we're also trying to do is to bring about diversity in the newsroom. We have a fellowship for students, a paid summer fellowship where we're for journalism or communications majors, because we want them to have that seat at the table or to build their own table, but they need that experience
So
so that
under Black and Missing,
Mhm.
you have your own separate internship or program, and it's paid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we need these students to be in those rooms where the decisions are being made and they can say, you know what, we need to feature this person or we need to tell this story because it's indicative of the community or the audience that we serve. So we recognize what the issue is and we're doing our part to bring about change, but we can't do it by ourselves.
Well, I stated a problem and you gave me the solution. Yes. To be honest, I did not know that. And yes, so I'm so incredibly important because also when I mentioned I've been in newsrooms for nearly 20 years at this point, and it is like being on the side of trying to amplify, trying to get a story that I feel very passionate about, or, giving amplification to someone I feel very passionate about. And it's hard because a lot of times I'm the only one in the room, you know?
Mhm,
So that power in numbers thing is so important to get more qualified people of color into those rooms because now we're understanding how this networking system works. We're understanding our strength in numbers and how if we come together in any room and we make our voice unified and
mhm,
cohesive
mhm.
and really explain why it's important to do these things, it's quite effective. And I can tell you that from my own personal experience because it's like night and day from when I first walked into a newsroom.
Yeah. And you know what, Erica, we have to also, as a community, speak up. When a child goes missing, we need to also call the news stations and say,
Mm.
our children need that coverage too. You just can't say, oh, you know what, I don't know that child. This is someone's, son or daughter. So call the news desk, call the reporters that you're familiar with, you see on TV every day, morning or afternoon, and ask them, hey, can you help us? Can you help the community? And we're not naive to think that every single missing persons case would receive coverage. We know that we're up against a tough news cycle. There's a war, pandemic, elections, you name it. But what we say is less is more. So less of one individual or one race. Let's give equal time to some other cases to help it go viral. Don't wait until it goes viral to talk about it. Help it to go viral by visibility.
Wow. Come back, kids. You're listening to Come Back with Erica Cobb. We are speaking with Natalie Wilson, co founder of the Black and Missing Foundation. While we're on the topic of getting an organization off the ground and like your story, You really took Black and Missing from the living room to the view. So,
Mhm.
for people who are listening, can you talk about the importance of telling your own story?
It's so important as a nonprofit to find your, and we call it your it factor. What makes you stand out? There are similar nonprofits that are doing the work that you're doing, but what makes you stand out so that you can connect with the audience that you serve? And again, tap into your local media outlets. Everyone, they want to be on, Daily Blast Live or The View or The Today Show. You're missing a very vital, media platform, which is your local television stations. And they can help you to be the thought leader. So when something happens, like with Black and Missing, you know, if there's a story, there people contact us or the media contact us first. But that took 14 years in the
Mhm.
making. It wasn't overnight. It was continuous, being present, keeping in contact with local and national reporters, and just being vigilant as we go about our work. So, again, being the thought leader in your industry is very important. So, when the news media outlets need an expert, guess who they're going to call? And
Right.
again, lean in on stats. People want to know, how does this affect me? And stats are a great way to tell a story, because we have been saying this story for quite a while.
Right.
40% of the missing persons population, guess what? People of color. And 37% of of that population are African Americans, yet we make up 13% of the population.
Right.
So it just doesn't jive.
Right. The numbers aren't numbering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that it is what that is, you
Yeah.
know? It's yeah. I mean, the disparities when it comes to people of color across the board in all arenas
Mhm.
are grave, but when you're talking about, yes, someone's child, mother, brother, uncle, like is missing, you would think that the humanity aspect would be a call to action on its own. But that's the world that we live in. And everyone has the opportunity. That was one of the things that I remember you saying when I spoke with you the first time on television, because you were talking about like very simple tasks that we can all be doing by sharing on our social media. And when I did that, I was like really in shock, like how people were just rallying, to get that one post out. And I don't know the impact that it made, but it made me feel like, well, maybe like I felt hopeful, in that moment that someone on that list was going to be found. And we talk about, the media attention and the importance of amplification and how much it helps. But when you're talking about the docuseries, and excuse me, I'll be clear, the HBO Black and Missing docuseries, because I want to give it a plug anytime I can. Can you give us kind of a checklist of for local or national outlets to kind of check themselves to see if they are really being in compliance with helping to get that message out?
You know, j- uh, and I don't want to call anyone out, because again, this work is done collaboratively.
Right.
But again, because a missing individual has a certain hue, just don't dismiss it. Don't stereotype that young woman as being fast or as being promiscuous. Let's look past, whatever community or zip code that they live in,
Mhm.
and be mindful that this is a valuable member of our society. So let's remove all of the barriers. And race should not be a barrier to media coverage and law enforcement assistance. And when a child is reported missing, let's help bring that child home. Last week, we were working with a mother whose 19-year-old daughter was missing. And she said that when she went to the police department to report her child missing, the officer said, "How do you know she's not laid up with some man?" And the mother said she had to turn away. But how insensitive is that for you to say to a mother who's searching for her daughter? We have to, again, put ourselves in these family shoes, because it could be any one of us. It could be any one of our loved ones that's missing. And if you have the power of the pen, or you're the gatekeeper, help us to bring about change. Don't turn a blind eye, because you're not personally impacted by it.
I don't know why I get so surprised by things after everything that I've seen and heard, especially being in this industry, but it just never ceases to amaze me, you know, as at 19, when I was 19, and I'm referring to the case that you were just speaking of, is it possible at 19 that you've made a decision to go off for a couple of days? Yes, that is possible. However, if that was a white mother,
Mhm,
would that question have been formulated in that way? And to me, it seems like the first line of defense to maybe keep the resources for someone that they feel is a more qualified candidate by deterring and really humiliating a
mhm,
mother who is just trying to find her child. So when I think about that story, it said to me that that was a deterrent for that mother to even come back and seek help, because they did not want to help her. So it's all like such coded and loaded language that only
mhm.
applies to certain groups of people and not to others.
And you hit it right on the head, Eric. And as you're saying that, we coach families in working with the media all the time as we get media coverage or media placement for them. And it's sad that, as a family or as parents, you have a whole lot of emotions bubbling up, because the unknown, you don't know where your child is or your loved one is. And we always tell parents, especially mothers, you cannot come across as an angry Black woman,
Mm,
because you have to connect with that audience. So, and it's sad that I have to say that to them,
right.
because there has to be a connection with you and the audience, and you cannot be angry.
Mm.
So, it's just so many things that we have to deal with. But, we have to just remember the end result is to find and bring that missing person home.
I have been a part of many interviews with families of missing people. And it always is so striking to me,
Mhm,
in my experience, how composed they are, because we'll generally, someone along the way will say, like, how are you keeping it together? And the idea that that is very purposeful, because then the message is lost, honestly wasn't even something I just thought, wow, there must be this divine strength. And there has to be some
yeah.
type of higher power strength for anyone to come on to a media outlet to talk about their missing loved one. But the idea of coaching, and yes, that makes so much sense when we think of, any type of tragedy that happens and there's a reporter on the street and it's like a direct, visceral reaction.
Mm,
Those tend to come across a little differently than someone coming on is and more of like a press conference. So many of the things that we see on television and the way that we're getting messages across is very purposeful. And a part of that is because of discrimination and lack of resources for certain groups of people, people of color, and also people who are considered lower quartile as well.
right.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. They're
always something to consider.
marginalized. Yeah.
Right, right. Something definitely to consider. Natalie, I want to draw on not only your PR experience and also you being the co-founder of Black and Missing, because there are a lot of people who are listening to this podcast right now and they're thinking about starting their own cause. Maybe it's something similar, maybe it's something completely different, a nonprofit. Can you give me 4 steps for someone to kind of get their nonprofit or their cause off the ground?
Okay. Well, one, first, make sure that file with the IRS, get your tax ID number and register your business. And it is a business. And that's another thing people don't think about. A nonprofit organization is a business. So make sure that you are in tax compliance. And, you have to have a plan and a goal, and you have to know what your end result is. For us, the end result is to find and bring missing people home. So everything we do is geared towards that goal. And we have a board. Another thing that you have to do, you have to create a board. And it's a governing body that helps you run the organization. And what I tell people is to use the resources or the people that you have within your network. You don't have to go out and hire, someone per se. Use what you have.
Mhm.
Use the resources that are readily available to you. There's a cousin who loves to write. They can be the secretary. There's someone who, likes accounting. Again, use what you have, and always remember to have visibility. You may not be able to afford PR, but you can reach out to the local reporter who is covering stories similar to your mission
Mm.
and get to know them, create that relationship. And again, be very visible, because you want to reach out to the audience that you serve. You also want to connect with volunteers and donors who can help fund the organization and keep it running. And in this climate that we're in today, there's so many social justice issues, and people want to use their voice and they don't know what to do. But again, create a plan, write it down, make the vision very clear, and just do it. And you don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, because you'll tweak it as you go along.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I've been hearing the same message a lot. Like the idea everyone wants to start when it's perfect. And it's like it doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be impactful.
Ex-
So yes, I appreciate that. So after you've gone through those steps, because I think another thing that I see a lot is burnout, fatigue,
Mhm.
and then you just kind of lose your momentum. So how do you stay relevant and how do you create longevity for your nonprofit or your cause?
I think if you're passionate about it, um, it will all work out. I think that sometimes we make things too difficult, and social media makes everything look perfect. And you know, give it all you have. That's what we do. We give it all that we have, and we have full-time jobs
Mm.
outside of Black and Missing, and we have businesses outside of Black and Missing, but we still give it everything that we have and have faith that it would work out. But you also have to have patience. As I mentioned earlier, it took us 14 years to get to the HBO docuseries, and everything that you're seeing now, it wasn't overnight.
Right.
It a lot of blood, sweat, tears. I mean, we cried a lot. Instead of being at a family event, we were working. But you do have to find a work-life balance so you're not burnt out.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, give it everything that you have, and you'll see doors opening and resources, being there to help you along the way. But don't give up. definitely don't give up.
I'm just smiling and shaking my head because 14 years, but look where you are. And most people don't have that type of tenacity. A lot of people, I think of people who are just trying to like, oh, I have this idea and, I want to, even like content creators and stuff, like I'm like, you have to keep going. You have to remain consistent because you're in it for the long haul until
Mhm.
something big where you are doing this reflection of like, wow, we started here in the living room and now it's this HBO docuseries, but we stuck this out for 14 years. Like, I know that according to Maya Angelou through Oprah, that you don't know what your legacy will be, but it's gotta be. I mean, does it feel like this is going to be a part of your ultimate legacy?
Whew, you know what? I don't know. We have so much work to do. And, now that I'm listening to you, we too need to step back and say, "Whoa, we've come a long way. We've done."
Yes.
But the need is great, Erica. When I tell you, since the docuseries, there's so many families that need help. And through the pandemic, you would think our caseload decreased, it
Yeah.
increased.
Yeah.
So we are just working really hard and diligently to help these families. And is this our legacy? I don't know. I'm being truthful. We're hoping that, we would never need a Black and missing. It would die a natural death
Mhm.
because, these cases would decrease it, or, if someone is missing, the media, law enforcement, and the community would take it seriously.
Mm.
But we just have so much more work to do. And what we're finding is that there are deep rooted systemic issues in our community that we need to fix,
Mhm.
that's causing people to go missing. Mental health,
Mhm.
domestic violence, our economic status, jobs, housing. There's so many deep rooted issues that are affecting our communities that we need to take a closer look at. So
Mm.
I don't know.
Well, Natalie, I'm just going to stop down for a second and it's going to be, first of all, Comeback Community. You are listening to Comeback with Erica Cobb. We are speaking with Natalie Wilson, co founder of Black and Missing, as well as the PR guru, NWR Communications Group. She is the founder. I'm just going to have a little note from your host. That would be me, Erica Cobb. I never do this, but I'm gonna do it today because you said a couple things. One, I do believe in messages, and messages come to you for a reason at the right time. And this
Mhm.
morning I watched this just a small clip on Instagram, and it was a woman who was evaluating Halle Berry talking about what she reflected on in her 20s, what happened in her 30s and 40s and each decade. And she talked about the importance of reflection, that reflection is a very powerful tool. It can also be a reset for your passion. So when you were saying, you had just thought about the 14 years to where you got it, where you are, and you hadn't thought about it, I'm going to encourage you to think about that and think
Mhm.
about it a lot, because I'm doing that. And what I found was it reinvigorated everything that I'm
Mhm.
doing because so much of what I do, up until recently, I was doing for 10 years for free. And
Mhm.
and recently I've been able to turn it into an actual profiting business. So I do understand that idea of just being so passionate about something that you're willing to do it for free and you're willing to grind at it. So I want to encourage you, sis, to take a moment of reflection and really think about where you were and where you are, because as you mentioned, the cases continue to come and it's got to feel like you're constantly treading water, but you are making so many broad strokes, and it's such an important thing that you're doing, and you are successful. Like, you are a success story. And I know that it probably feels like there's continuing to be missing people. So that's not a success, but you are in this moment, and every moment is a success story for you. So I want to just give you your flowers, because I think it's important that we do that for one another. The second thing is, and like I said, I never do this, but I also want to put a moment of clarity for my listeners, because when you mentioned that during the pandemic, you would have thought that the cases went down, but the cases of missing people went up. And I and my husband are CASAs, court appointed special advocates for children. And we actually have been a part of this conversation. And it goes back to what you were talking about with visibility. The idea that so many of our children were not in schools where they had eyes on them and accountability on them every day put far more people in vulnerable populations, meaning that they were either abused at a higher rate or they went missing. So when we talk about visibility is so important, that is a direct reflection of exactly what you said earlier. And that is my soliloquy.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for that. And I get it. And maybe I shouldn't say this, and you can edit this. I will be 53. And sometimes I think I'm chasing life because, raise the kids, husband, have the family. And I'm like, okay, where am I in life? And I have more years behind me than I do in front of me. So, just trying to find out, what does success, really, really look like for me. You could edit that part.
No, I would prefer not to, if that's okay with
Okay.
you, because that's a very real thought. It's a very real moment. And I think of my mother, who is older, much older than you.
Mhm.
But she, is very much a community leader. Her entire dissertation was about bringing access to mathematics to
Mm.
marginalized and low income communities. She worked side by side with Bob Moses, who was a civil rights leader and who recently passed. And I'm constantly like, Mom, you're a success. You're a success, which is exactly the reason why I'm saying it to you. And she's like,
Mhm.
but there are children who don't have access still. And I'm like, well, you can't necessarily reach everyone and actually touch them, but rest assured, your work is touching everyone. It's an umbrella effect. And someone else is going to pick up the torch, and they are going to, make sure that other people are covered. So it's a very, it's contagious and
Mhm.
it's impactful. So I'm glad you shared that, because I know a lot of people feel that way, and we need to check ourselves, because if we're doing the work, we're doing far more work than a lot of other people are doing. Yeah.
Great point. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Sometimes I can make it. Well, Natalie, before I let you go, what's next for the Black and Missing Foundation, and how can our listeners get involved?
So, what's next for the Black and Missing Foundation? We would like to open satellite offices
Mm.
in areas where we know are hotspots, like Chicago, Atlanta, Detroit, LA, Baltimore. But we need the financial support from our community. Derek and I have been able to bring closure to close to 400 cases. But think about, if we're able to scale up, how many more people can we bring home? And we would love to have a team of investigators, therapists, counselors, case workers to help the organization. So we are ready to grow and expand the organization, but we definitely need our community to rally around us, to volunteer as well, and financial support, and to just help these families and help us.
So how do we find and follow Black and Missing, and how do we find and follow you?
Okay. So you can visit bamfi.org, and that's for the Black and Missing Foundation. Please follow the page, subscribe to our newsletter, and see who's missing from your community. Let's start there. Go to our website, again, bamfi.org, see who's missing from your community and share it within your network. And you can also find me at NWR Comms Group, and that's on Instagram, to learn more about the NWR Communications Group, which is a PR agency for nonprofits.
Natalie Wilson, before I let you go, is there anything else that you would like to share with our comeback community?
We all can do something. Don't just say, you know what, again, don't turn a blind eye. Use your voice and your platform, whatever it is, to bring about change, because we all possess something that can help someone. And you can't be silent anymore.
Right. We all possess something that can help someone. Natalie Wilson, co-founder of the Black and Missing Foundation and founder of NWR Communications Group. Please find, please follow, please repost and get the word out, because you are an important piece of this puzzle as well, in hopes that we amplify the message to bring our missing home. Please go to my online home for more on Natalie Wilson, as well as the Black and Missing Foundation, as well as the full podcast at comeback.tv. Natalie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.